Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining today's conversation on climbing the ladder and lessons learned. I'm Fong Kushida, and I'm President and CEO of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. Today is the third of 4 amazing conversations we're hosting throughout the month as part of our Minority Women Lead campaign. Working with our partners, National ACE and the Minority Business Development Agency, we put this series together to inspire, uplift professional women of color across the country. Today, we'll hear from 5 exceptional women on their leadership journeys and what they've learned along the way. You can read about their bios in the digital program that we've linked in the Zoom chat. Before we get into our program, I want to remind you all to visit our website, minoritywomenlead.com, to read the stories and insights from other successful women of color. For those of you on social media, you can engage with our campaign and post your own stories by using the hashtag MinorityWomenLead. Now, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank all of our sponsors. Event sponsors, Wells Fargo and Southwest Airlines. Our silver sponsors, the Coca-Cola Company, Comcast, Postmates, and Union Bank. Our bronze sponsors, Lyft and Siemens Mobility. Now, at the end of our panel discussion, we will be selecting a winner to receive 1 round-trip Southwest Airlines e-ticket. The winner will be selected at random from our list of registered attendees, and you must be present to win. So now I'd like to introduce my good friend and CEO and President of National ACE, Ms. Chiling Tong. Chiling? Chiling, you're on mute.
I'm trying to learn on a daily basis. Thank you. Pat, thank you. I deeply appreciate your leadership and great work of your team members, especially Matt, Janice, and Lauren. We would like to welcome all of you to our event today and climbing the ladder and lesson learned. We are so honored to have our good friend Terrez Thompson from Coca-Cola moderating our panel. Terrez has done so much for the minority and Asian American Pacific Islander community and has been a role model for many people through the years. And also we have 4 amazing lady speakers who will be sharing their stories. One of the things that has been evident throughout this series has been the role relationship has played in helping to shape many of the women we have heard from. Relationship come in all forms: professional relationship, personal relationship, mentoring relationship. I have been personally impacted by women, especially on the panel, on which I have had the pleasure of working with and learning from. As we look at our world today, I want to remind all of us the power of women and the power of the relationship women have built during these difficult times. The impact of COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on all of our small business, especially our minority and AAPI business. Rebuilding our country and our communities will take all of us working together. We hope these minority women's stories inspire you today so that you can go into your community, your neighborhood, and your business to make an impact tomorrow. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce Jetheda Hernandez, who served as the Senior Advisor for External Affairs for the U.S. Minority Business Development Agency. MBDA is a proud partner for today's event. Jetheda has been seen as a national advocate for entrepreneurship and economic mobilization for over 15 years. She also played a leading role in MBDA's Enterprising Women of Color initiative. Jetheda.
Thank you so much, Chiling. The Minority Business Development Agency's Enterprising Women of Color initiative is so excited to partner with the National ACE and CalAsian Chamber of Commerce to present this Minority Women Lead virtual series. Today, during the third installment of a 4-week virtual series, we're going to take a closer look at the climbing ladder of professional women and the tools that it took for them to get there. For those of you who are not familiar with MBDA's EWOC initiative, the program was launched in 2019 and included a multi-city tour to promote the development and growth of women of color MBEs, to provide access to increased opportunities for partnership development, and also to build strong business coalitions for women of color. The data of the growth of women of color businesses is astounding. Within the last 5 years, women-owned businesses grew 21%, while firms owned by women of color grew at double that rate, 42%. In fact, while women of color entrepreneurs accounted for 89% of the net new women-owned businesses. There's a bigger picture here through all of this. Women of color entrepreneurs are helping to drive the U.S. economy. They employ over 2 million people and generate over $400 billion in revenue annually. As our cities and states begin to open up across the country, be assured that MBDA continues to stand in full support of all of our minority communities. We are especially thankful for the minority-owned businesses and individuals who are combating COVID-19 on the front lines. Before I turn the program over, I invite you to follow EWOC via all of our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, to stay up to date on all of our events and resources for women of color. Let's not forget that we're all in this together. Back to you, Chiling.
Thank you, Jetheda. We really appreciate your leadership and also your commitment to the minority business community. Now it is my honor to introduce today's conversation, Climbing the Ladder and Lessons Learned. I would like to introduce the moderator, Terrez Thompson. Terrez is my friend and my mentor. She is the Vice President of Global Supply Diversity for the Coca-Cola Company. Terrez has a great accomplishments through her career and always give back to the communities. She has served many critical roles at Coca-Cola, such as leading the company's 1 billion empowerment and entrepreneur program for minority and women-owned business. Her leadership in the professional world and community activities has become an integral part of shaping the supply diversity landscape. Let us welcome our moderator, Terrez Thompson.
Hello, Chiling. I am humbled by your introduction, and I consider you a mentor of mine as well. So let's begin. And I'd just like to start by saying good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of those who have decided to join us to spend their afternoon with us. As I said, I am honored to be a part of this. I'm honored to have the opportunity to moderate a panel with such esteemed women. I am also honored to be on the board of National ACE, and I think this is my third time participating in this CalAsian event, which comes very dear to my heart. So before I proceed, I want to thank and acknowledge this great partnership between CalAsian, Chamber, National ACE, MBDA, and the Coca-Cola Company, which I have served for 35 years. Pat, Chiling, Jetheda, and their teams are wonderful. They're the ultimate professionals, and everybody that I've worked with not only does this as a job, but it comes near and dear to their heart. This has been a great month. I've actually sat in on the 2 preceding sessions, and they were great. And I am certain that this session and these participants will prove to be just another successful rung on this ladder, so to speak. So let's get started with talking about Climbing the Ladder and Lessons Learned from these great leaders and women. Today we have Sue Bhatia, who's also a friend of mine. She's the founder and chairwoman of Rose International, one of the leading staffing firms nationally, and it may actually be global. Sue can let us know. Sue is known for her generosity. She believes in giving back. And then Lisa Chang, I'm really excited about this, you know, talking about climbing the ladder, even though I'm a little late in my career. Not only did I see this as an opportunity to showcase a new leader at Coca-Cola, but to make that connection so she would know who I am. You got to do things like that. And she is Chief People Officer and Senior Vice President of the Coca-Cola Company. She's my colleague, and I have watched her from afar, and I'm very impressed with the things that she has done to change our culture in a very positive way. Then we have Linda Shim, who's the Executive Director of External Affairs of Comcast, NBC Universal, another leader in the diversity space. Many great women serve at Comcast, and they have great programs, and they're also a member of the $1 Billion Roundtable, which the Coca-Cola Company aspires to be. And then last, but of course not least, Tina Wee Smith. She's the Executive Director of the White House's Initiative on AAPI Businesses. I presented on a panel with Tina, and Tina is great. She is new in this, but you can see her passion for women and entrepreneurs, especially AAPI. And she told me she's a late millennial, but she's a real millennial, and I'm really impressed with the firepower that she brings. So ladies, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and I would say Sue, Lisa, Linda, and Tina, if you would do that in that order. And just brief nuggets, because as Pat suggested, the bios are digital, but there are probably some brief nuggets that you'd like to bring to the audience before we start our chat. So Sue, if you would start.
Thank you, Terrez. You already gave a very nice introduction. Thank you. And the bio is there. But basically, I'm an immigrant. I have been in this country for about 33 years. I migrated from India. And then soon after, 7 years later, I started my company. So we do staffing. We provide talent acquisition in many different ways for Fortune 500 companies. And we've grown into an international organization. We're not fully global yet.
And Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Terrez. Thanks for having me today. I'm Lisa Chang, and as Terrez said, I'm fairly new to Coca-Cola. Been here about 14 months. And in Coca-Cola world, that's very, very new. So I'm thrilled and honored to be able to be in the seat that I'm in today as the Chief People Officer. I have a long history of working in HR, and I believe I've been able to do most of that in the city of Atlanta, believe it or not, working for some great companies, including the professional sports teams, most recently the Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta United, and Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I worked at Turner Broadcasting and CNN and the Weather Channel. And so I consider Atlanta to be my home, and I'm thrilled to be, again, with this flagship company here. I'm excited to be on the panel today because I'm very passionate not only about diversity, but certainly about AAPI diversity, and honored to be able to share some nuggets of my own journey in terms of how I've gotten into the role that I'm in with a lot of support. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Lisa. Linda?
Thanks, Terrez, and thanks to CalAsian Chamber and National ACE for having me here today. I'm going to do Lisa one better. I'm even newer to the company that I work for. I've been with Comcast, NBC Universal for, I'm about to hit my 1 year mark, so just about 12 months. Most of my experience has actually been coming up through the public sector. I worked for members of Congress from California in the House of Representatives, worked a great deal on API diversity there. My last boss was Congresswoman Judy Chu from California, who's chair of the Asian Pacific American Caucus in the House or in Congress. So worked with a number of the great agencies that are represented here, and with WHIAAPI, which I'm excited to hear from Tina as well. So I'm excited to be here, especially given that I'm raised raised and, born in California. So thanks for having me here today.
So Tina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to CalAsian, to MBDA Business Center, for Chiling and Jetheda for both extending the invitation, Terrez as well for moderating this program. I'm just really excited to hear from the three other panelists, to be honest. Terrez, this is the first time I'm really in the hot seat. I'm usually interviewing amazing people. So I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous today. Usually I'm not sharing my story, but I'm excited to be here. I am the executive director for the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I also staff the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So there's a lot of work to be done there to really support AAPIs through economic and workforce development. My background, I also have a background in public policy and also in higher education. Previously, serving as the Global Engagement Director over at Asbury University in Kentucky, where we worked on developing their cross-cultural competency, their curriculum there. And this is my second presidential administration that I've worked for. I also worked under the Bush administration with Secretary Chow at Department of Labor. And I've also had a little stint on the Hill with my congressman from the district I grew up in New Jersey, Congressman Frelinghuysen, who's retired. But Linda has much more extensive Hill experience than I have. So I'm interested in hearing more from her as well. So thank you all so much for having me here. And I do want to add, Terrez, I am a mother of 3 little ones that I absolutely love. This is also why I'm sitting in the office doing the interview, because if I did this at home, there's no way I could keep them out of the room. So.
We can all relate, I'm sure. So I'm going to start with Sue. Sue, you and I have interacted a lot because of what I do in supplier diversity. Rose International is known across the supplier diversity space and known across corporate America as a firm that we can rely on for staffing. It's one of the largest in the nation, I mentioned. Can you share with the audience why you founded and started Rose after having such a successful career?
Yes, thank you, Terrez. Like I mentioned, I'm an immigrant. I came here in the US in the late 80s. I got my master's degree in management information systems and joined corporate America soon after. So I was happy. I had a good job. I got married. I had a loving husband, an amazing son, and a beautiful daughter. Life was good. And then one day at work, I was due for a raise, and my boss called me in to discuss just that. So he told me I was doing an excellent job and that my pay would increase to $18 an hour. So at that moment, right in that chair, sitting in that room, it dawned on me that it would take me about 30 years to get the level of success that I wanted with my education that I had. So I just got back home and I told my husband, I can't do this. I have to start my own business. So I set up a phone, a desk, and a fax machine in the basement of my home, and I started cold calling. I got a lot of no's, and we all hear no's in our life, but that's when we need to have a clear goal to keep us moving forward. So my goal at that time was to make sure my children have a better life. Like they say, in the darkest moments, we make the greatest progress. So within 6 months, I got 3 major contracts. And now 26 years later, we have hired 10,000 people annually for the last several years. And recently, we were the only staffing company named to Glassdoor's Best Places to Work list for 2019 and 2020, all due to our employees' dedication and a culture that we all created together. So we're on this list with amazing organizations such as Facebook, McKinsey, Trader Joe's, all committed to providing opportunities and creating an atmosphere internally that helps people succeed in the company. So that's my nutshell of why I started and where we are today.
Hey, Sue, it also sounds like in that story that you picked a great life partner to support you, which I think ladies out in the audience, and actually gentlemen, if you're there, that's critical in climbing any ladder of success. So Lisa, I'm going to turn to you next as my colleague, knowing that you've had, having worked in, at least I know, 2 major corporations and and then working for a sports team that's large, but probably fairly people-oriented, family-oriented as well, just being from Atlanta myself, or at least for the last 40 years. Kind of think back with those experiences and what people in leadership positions look like at the beginning of your career and how it looks now, and maybe elaborate on the progress that you see and even the lack of progress, and how that has impacted you as you climb the ladder.
Yes, sure, Terrez. Yeah, if I think back to sort of the early days of my career, I definitely would say that the leaders were very hierarchical and command and control. I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank in one of my early jobs as an analyst, sort of, the quasi-governmental space. And I remember distinctly, I was an analyst and I was trying to just, get my job done. And I needed to get some information from one of the attorneys upstairs. And I made the mistake of picking up the phone and calling his office directly. And I was reprimanded for not following the chain of command, because I was a certain level in the organization and I wasn't really supposed to call management. I was supposed to go through my manager. So I think if you think back to that time compared to today, where through a lot of things, social media and otherwise, and again, the new generation, there really isn't, I think, as much of a barrier between leaders and employees as there used to be, both from a interaction standpoint, but certainly from an expectation standpoint. I find and I actually appreciate it, I find it very heartening when employees of ours have ideas and thoughts and they're bold enough to email me or email the CEO and say, hey, I have this idea. That would have never happened back in the day. So I think that's certainly one piece of it. I think the other piece is definitely there were far fewer women and people of color, and certainly far fewer Asians, from my perspective, in those seats at the time. And so being able to look back today to where we sit, where we are definitely more diverse than we were back then. We still have a long ways to go, but I appreciate, in particular on the women's side, being able to see female leaders in roles that, I can see modeling my career after as I continue to climb in the roles that I had. But I think certainly progress is, someone had said to me once, progress is slow but sudden. So I don't think you realize the change until you step back and say, wow, if I think back to that time, what did leadership look like? Not to mention, a lot of changes in terms of how just communication happens. It was much more formal back then. It's much more informal now. So I think, we definitely have a lot to be proud of in terms of how far we've come.
So Linda, you've got a very interesting experience, and it sounds like government as well as corporate. And I would ask you, could you add on to Lisa's perspective when you think back to when you started to where you are now, how the leadership, the face of leadership has changed for the good and the better, and kind of what your take is on that as you continue to climb that ladder of success as a woman, AAPI woman?
Of course. And I think I can relate to what Lisa just presented there. When I started off years ago as a intern, then a very junior staffer on the Hill, I definitely saw the hierarchy, who can talk to whom, who could reach out to who. And I think over time, many years later, you start seeing the change in conversation. You see some of the parts of the ceiling kind of going away. So when I left the Hill a little over a year ago, I started seeing the newer members coming in who are younger, bringing a new culture. And so they like to be addressed by their first names versus, their titles, right? So you start seeing that, but I think the dialogue has changed too, where I feel I've only worked, up until I went into the corporate setting, I only worked for female principals. So my first boss was a woman member of Congress. My last was also a woman member. So, I think my first boss, Jane Harmon, taught me how to push more myself as a woman and how to present myself in certain meetings and engage in discussions and negotiations. And, she taught me a lot about how to be assertive and how to speak up for myself as a woman. And then my last boss, Judy Chu, taught me about how to do that being a woman of color, being API. And I definitely saw the dialogue shift over the years because I feel I couldn't have talked about myself as a woman of color in certain settings when I first started off in my professional career. But now it's something that we can talk very freely about and really fight for sort of our seat at the table. And as we were talking about earlier, I think Sue mentioned it, even when we're talking about pay and equity, right? I feel like that dialogue has changed. So I'm new to the corporate private sector in that setting, but I'm looking forward to seeing sort of how some of the lessons I've learned in the public sector can transfer over.
Linda, I'm just going to ask you a brief follow-up on that. You mentioned, and I think you mentioned it specifically, that you had worked for women members of Congress, and it sounds like it was nurturing and coaching. I'm assuming that you got to interact with your peers who may have worked for men members of Congress. Just briefly, do you believe that their experiences were the same in terms of the coaching and the mentoring that you got from those women Congress people?
No, I mean, I do think, I have friends who've worked for great men who have mentored and coached them along the way as well. I think for me, the added bonus was to actually see it happen before me and actually be able to witness what they did in a room where they might be the one woman in the room or the one woman of color in the room. And I just got to see that example firsthand. So that was empowering. And I think one thing I'll add to your first question, Terrez, is just seeing the leadership change over time. I think Lisa mentioned that it's happening slowly, and I agree with that. It is a little too slow, but just seeing sort of even within my own company, the person who brought me in was a woman mentor, and just being able, and she had left the role that I had to move on to something different. So just being able to see women move up and move on, there needs to be more of that. And I think even from when I've started off in my career, I feel like I have more senior women to turn to, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. So Tina, this question I'm going to ask you relates to the subject, but it's also a matter of curiosity for me. You have a unique role. And so before we get into the specific conversation, kind of share with us briefly why the White House has focused in on women of color, entrepreneurs, and AAPI women of color specifically. Because as I said, I've seen you at least twice promoting this cause. And so I'm just interested to hear your perspective on that and why the focus.
Great. So President Trump reestablished the White House initiative on AAPIs with a focus on economic empowerment. WHIAAPI, the initiative, and the President's Advisory Commission, it has, it's resided in different departments and agencies over its time, starting with President Clinton, in fact. And so it's been at HHS, Health and Human Services, it's been at Education, and also at Commerce, and it's the second time the initiative's been here, and I think it's very timely. The economic empowerment of more than 22 million AAPIs. There's 1.9 million businesses that generate over $700 billion in revenue. And particularly as we're seeing with this health pandemic and the subsequent economic challenges, AAPIs are particularly hurt, especially those in the restaurant and service industry. So I think it's very timely where we are located. And I think having that focus on the economic development, we're talking about workforce development as well, whether that's within the federal government, outside of the federal government. And Secretary Ross of Commerce and also Secretary Elaine Chao of Transportation are co-chairs of the initiative. As you all know, Secretary Chao is an amazing trailblazer within the public sector and the private sector. And under her leadership, we certainly are very focused on API women empowerment. Here in Commerce as well, with Secretary Ross, there is the American Workforce Advisory Council that is co-chaired by Ivanka Trump and with Secretary Ross. And certainly, you know, a lot of women issues are being addressed there. There's also the women's GDP. Sorry, I always forget the names of all the acronyms, but is it the growth, prosperity, development for women around the world, and focusing on the economic development of women, you know, knowing that if we empower them, you know, they in turn are empowering the rest of their communities, they're not just their families, you know, but the rest of their community and society as a whole. So I think it's, you know, so important that we are looking at advancing API women in leadership. The President's Advisory Commission, that is also one of their focus area as we're talking about the glass ceiling and leadership of the private and public sector. And of course, you know, through MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, and Enterprising Women of Color, and the work that Jetheda is doing over there, and partnering with her, you know, we're excited to do that as well. So I think there's just so many different ways that we are working in this area. I mean, Terrez, I could probably talk for days, but I don't want to take up everyone's time. Well, and certainly as a woman myself, it's important that we're focusing on this area. Yeah.
And I think, and the point there, and the reason I asked the question for the audience is, one, many times entrepreneurs don't necessarily think that the government has resources that can help build their businesses and their careers. And so I would say go on those websites. The work that the council is doing, that Tina leads, as well as the MBDA, are critical resources. And in this digital age, there's no reason not to get to those. So Sue, I'm going to go back to you. And I was going to ask you one question that you know first, but I wanted to actually ask you, knowing the unique challenges that you face as a woman of color, what advice would you give your younger self? I love those questions in terms of navigation for success.
Yeah, if I could just do one quick plug, because I just remember that over at the Small Business Administration, they just appointed a API woman to serve heading their women's business entrepreneurship program over there. So that's definitely someone to reach out to as well. You know, that I love that question, because I asked that to our
actually, Tina, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I meant to direct that to Sue. I apologize. That must have been my mistake. I apologize. Okay. But we'll get back to you real soon. And so Sue, I am so sorry.
That's okay. I think all of us have a lot to tell our younger self. Yeah. I would certainly tell myself, my younger self, to be less self-critical. I think as women, we often hold ourselves back and listen to that inner critic a lot. You know, a study by HP found that women needed to match 100% of a job skills, while men only needed 60% of a skills match to feel confident enough to apply. So women of color also, you know, we face microaggressions. We also have imposter syndrome more commonly than others. So knowing that you're not the only one going through what you're going through is important, and you can dismiss it more easily. Nowadays with the internet, people have the luxury to research and understand that it's not just happening to them, it's happening to many people. So you can dismiss it, and you don't let these define you, hold you back, or keep you in a negative place. So, you know, just let your work speak for itself. Outperform the doubters. Look at these instances as opportunities for change. And don't let your differences be a limitation if you want to succeed. That is the biggest barrier you can put on yourself. I think our gender, our race, our cultural background, and other factors are things to be proud of, but they don't define our whole self. We are so much more than all of that.
Thank you, Sue. I agree with that. Very good words of wisdom. So Lisa, let me get these names right. What is the biggest lesson that you have learned? What is the biggest lesson that you've learned in your career so far? And what are the few lessons that you have recently learned that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think Sue took a lot of the words out of my own mouth. I mean, it's amazing how many similar experiences we all have. with everything that you said, the imposter syndrome and some of these other things. But what I would say the biggest lesson I've learned, and I've learned it the hard way, is don't be afraid to ask for help. I think a lot of times, and I think this is a lot of times it is gender related, because we, to your point, Sue, we feel like we have to be 100% qualified for jobs. We feel like we have to have the experiences. I mean, one of the reasons that I believe there are fewer women in the top seats is because we are hesitant to put ourselves in the running for it out of fear of this imposter syndrome. And I don't quite have all that experience. And what if they ask me something I don't know? Or what if I have to lead an area that I've never experienced? And so the what if, it's that self-talk in your own head. But I think that don't be afraid to ask for help is a really important lesson that I've learned, which is they never, you shouldn't expect yourself to have the answers to everything. No one is ever expected to do that. But being able to ask for help is often a sign of strength. It's also a sign of leadership, a sign of being able to delegate, all things that are actually counter to what I think we would normally think, which is a sign of weakness, right? So I think being able to ask for help. I think the other one is don't be afraid of failure. Another thing that we super achieving women don't like to admit to is making a mistake or stumbling or falling down or quite frankly just failing at something that we try. And the best lesson I learned out of that is someone had once said to me, use your gravestones as your stepping stones. So once you make that mistake, it's not really about dwelling on the mistake, but it's dwelling on the learning. What is it that you learned out of that mistake that will set you up for the future and not making the same mistake, or better, improving on what you did the last time to ensure success the next time. So I think that's an important one for me. Most recently, I think what I've learned, the lessons I've learned are amplified because, having the privilege of working for a company like Coca-Cola with such global scale and breadth. I've worked in global companies before, but certainly Coca-Cola is the largest of the ones that I've worked for, is all of these leadership attributes are amplified. So when you talk about dealing with tens of thousands of employees versus hundreds, when you talk about dealing with hundreds of countries instead of one, you sometimes get a little nervous about, do I really have what it takes to get to lead in the way that I need to lead? And what I have found, and Terrez, I've kind of anchored on that, is leading people is leading people. Leading organizations is leading organizations. Whether you have one employee or you have 100,000 employees, we're all people, and we all sort of focus on the same things that are important. We want to be treated like humans. We want transparency in communication. We want authenticity in leadership. And so my learning, I think, is that it's not all that different. And actually, you have to lean in more, because I think as the companies get larger, it's easier for leaders to distance themselves and to sort of make it sort of a coldness in dealing with employees, as opposed to the opposite, which is you almost have to lean in more because the company is so large. And so that has been a wonderful revelation for me, because if I had any one major concern about joining a company as large as Coke, it was sort of feeling like I wouldn't be able to have personal relationships with people because the company was so big. And it's actually the opposite. I feel like now I have even more connections with more people, and the company has given me the opportunity to extend that even farther.
Okay, this is so good, and we're running out of time, so we're gonna have to go to Q&A, but I do have one thing I'm gonna ask you, Lisa, and I want you to take like 15 seconds. You said a couple of things about experiences that women have. I see you sort of as a clinician, kind of, in your role as Chief People Officer. Do you actually see that, in fact, with all of the various people that you work with in terms of women's behavior and men's behavior? I mean, I've thought about women who've come to me and said, well, should I apply for that job? I'm like, of course you should. And it's like, she wanted to check off every box. And I knew guys who were good who checked off 2 boxes and felt comfortable. So I just want to hear your perspective as a Chief People Officer.
Well, I'll say it as a Chief People Officer, but I'll also say it as a mother of a daughter and 2 sons.
There you go.
It is genetic. It's biological. I think girls just naturally have more caution. Now, there's always the exception to the rule. But generally, if you watch girls versus the boys are wild and crazy. They'll try anything. You tell them, don't jump off that ledge, they're going to jump off it twice. You tell a girl, don't do that, they're not doing it, right? So I think there is some geneticism to it that we have to acknowledge and recognize. But what we do know is that you are a product of your environment. So if we create a supportive, safe environment and we teach young girls and women that it's okay to fall, it's okay to fail, pick yourself up, learn, grow, be safe, take risks, that is learned behavior. So I think it's absolutely something that I see every single day.
So to bring the audience in, and I'm sorry I didn't get to answer all the standard questions, but I think there's some great questions from the audience. And I'm going to start with, popped up in front of me. I'm going to start with Linda, and then I'm going to go to Tina just to kind of make sure I keep the balance. So the first question that I have is, thank you, and this is to Linda. Thank you everyone for taking your time to speak on this panel and for inspiring us. The question is, what are you doing in your own organization to help other women of color to achieve success like yours? And so I'll actually let Linda, as I said, answer that.
Yeah, of course. And even though I'm a year into my current role at Comcast, in this year, similar to how Lisa described, I've really just tried to get to know the people, get to understand my surroundings, and hear, especially from other women. Part of my portfolio is also working with partners in the women's organization space. So also to kind of align our company's priorities, I also wanted to hear from women within our own company as well, to understand what are the employee priorities as well, and how does that also align with our corporate priorities. So right now I'm really new into it. So I'm really just trying to also identify themes of how are women feeling in this organization. But at the same time, I've also been mentoring a lot of women that I've, left behind in the public sector that I've advised over the years. So, I've continued to do regular coffees with them. I've continued to speak on panels to talk about growth. And I think some of the points that all the speakers touched on, which is be confident, don't give in to imposter syndrome, and really building sort of a coalition of women or a safe space for women to talk about some of those fears. And I think, and I don't mean to hijack another question, Terrez, but
No, do it, please. This is
and based off of what Lisa said, which was, don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think one of the questions is, do we look weaker than men when we ask for help? And I've gotten that question a lot. And what I say is, ask that question with a lot of confidence. Especially being new to the company, I've had to ask a lot of questions that I normally wouldn't on a daily basis. But at the same time, I know I wouldn't be able to perform my job or do it well if I'm not asking those questions. So I say, don't be afraid to ask them. If there are simple things that you can figure out on your own by Googling or what have you, maybe do that first. But there's going to be a lot of questions, even about company culture, about the nature of people's relationships and past issues, on how things were handled. I think, there are ways to ask questions that don't make you seem weak, and I don't think asking questions make you weak. So I just say, I encourage people to do it, but do it with confidence. Even last week alone, I had to message my boss and say, hey, in order for me to get these things done, I have a number of questions. Can we hop on the phone and talk this out? And, I don't think I came off weaker for doing that. So I just definitely want to address that question as well.
I agree 100%. So Tina, the next question is, what are some techniques that you would recommend to get rid of that inner critic and have the courage to go for the job you're 100% qualified for?
Techniques. Well, I think that, one of the things I've found to be really helpful is just to connect with mentors. You know, I've had one particular mentor who she's been there since my internship years, and is still a mentor today. And so, you know, I go to her for advice, you know, for questions that I might be afraid to ask others, or, you know, she's really, you know, she's a cheerleader to me, and all of the work that I'm doing. I think having someone else speak truth into me sometimes is really key, because I could probably just sit there all day and come up with, you know, 100 different reasons why I shouldn't do something or I shouldn't go for an opportunity, and then have someone else on the outside speak truth and say, no, you can actually do this. And, you know, having those supports around, you know, supporters around me, I think that's really key. I think mentorship is just, it's huge. I think time and again in a lot of the events that we do, you know, a lot of it, we do focus on mentorship, whether that is for those who are newly entering into the workforce, or those, you know, changing their careers, or even, you know, those who are further ahead. I can't overemphasize the importance of mentorship. And I do have and I've had mentors, whether they're my supervisor or boss, who are men, that have been really terrific as well. And I think you need advocates, obviously, on both sides. If you want to get ahead, if you want to be able to climb that ladder, and, you know, do the work that you're passionate about doing. So I can't overemphasize mentorship. And you know, confidence is just so important. Sometimes I tell myself I just need to fake that confidence and just to take that first step, you know, take that step forward. I watch my 4-year-old son, and everything that we want to do, whether it's learning something new, or we just you know, been grateful for a piano that's been handed down to us. So that's our, you know, that's our pandemic activity right now. And he's just like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can play the piano. I'm like, hold on. There's so many steps before there. But the confidence that he walks in with is such a great reminder, even to myself, that I can walk into that room with confidence. You know, I certainly have a wealth more of experience than he does. But I think those are two things that I've been time and again, you know, reminding myself of as well.
I think that's critical, Tina. I always tell young people who come to me, there's very few people I've ever asked for advice or encouragement who've turned it down. I mean, even people who may have bad reputations, most people find it as an honor, I find, to be asked to be informal mentors and coaches. So Sue, there's actually a question directly for you. And they're saying, how did you figure out what you wanted to do at inception when you were working out of your basement? I can't see you, Sue. Are you on mute, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yes, yes. So I was working in information technology, and in our department, we were hiring a lot of contractors for work. And that was something that I saw. There was a lot of room for improvement, for efficiencies to be brought into that process, and to do it for a much lower cost. So that is something that it was clear to me when I wanted to start my company what I wanted to do, because the opportunity kind of presented itself to me while I was working.
Okay. And Lisa, this question is specifically for you. What advice would you give to women trying to climb up the corporate ladder?
Yes. Well, the first thing
that's an open-ended one, I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, the first thing I would say is I do think, and this is a fairly recent, say, you know, last 10 years revelation for me, is I think we first have to understand that the corporate ladder may lead to different places for different people. So some people have a vertical ladder, some people have a horizontal ladder, some people don't have ladders, they have a step stool. So I think the first thing is to define what is your ladder, right? Because, you know, I think the days of everybody wanting to be the CEO isn't exactly what everybody wants to achieve. So in the case of Sue, her ladder was being the boss of herself. And so I think that's a perfect example of taking control of your own ladder and deciding what that success looks like. So that's the first thing, because don't let someone else define that success for you, is what I would say is really important. I think the second thing is really focus your efforts on a passion that you have. And so if you're in a company where you aren't being recognized, or you don't feel like you're getting the opportunities that you want, or you feel like you're working extremely hard with little to no recognition for the work that you're doing, I think you need to reevaluate whether that's the right place for you, either from a company perspective, from a culture perspective, or even from a career perspective. And so there are multiple variables that I often tell people that lead to your own personal success. And so it's not as easy as, again, one step in front of the other. You have to look at the whole balance of what it is that's going to get you there. And sometimes in order to get to the top of your ladder, you might have to step over sideways and take a couple of side steps, right? And so in my own career, I did the same thing, which is just as a perfect example, because I know you know my former employer was Equifax as well. I worked at a financial services company. I was working at Turner before then, and I had global responsibility for tens of thousands of employees with CNN and Turner Broadcasting. And when I had the opportunity to make a shift, what I decided was I really wanted to focus on international, that was really important for me to get that skill set so that I could one day have a position like the one that I have. And so I took really a sort of lateral and a slight step down to focus exclusively on a role that had international. I didn't have any responsibilities for anything in the US. My job was really to support international because I wanted to add that tool, those skills to my tool set. So I think that the last piece of advice is sometimes you have to take a couple side steps to go up, and don't be afraid to do that, because that's really just part of the process.
And I'm going to share this before we end. So Lisa works for someone who's a very, very good friend of mine. I had never met Lisa, but I remember when Lisa left that international position to go to a new position, the person who she worked for was devastated. And so it's just so funny to meet you now, having heard that experience, and that's the truth. And anybody knows me knows I only speak the truth from my perspective. So we've got like 1 minute, and any word, I'm going to go around a round table, starting with Sue. Any words of advice for the audience in 15 seconds, please.
Oh man, how do you give all that years and years of experience in 15 seconds? All I can say is that, you know, even if you're in a male-dominated field, let your work speak for itself. You know, there are unconscious and implicit biases everywhere, but you choose to ignore them, even though they're there. Be aware and then push them aside and let your work speak for itself.
Tina, 15 seconds of fame.
Sure. You know, just, you know, I told this to our interns recently, and I know that whether it's, you know, concerns about discrimination, microaggression in the workplace, but instead, I encourage them to actually prepare yourself to have that seat at the table, because you might just have that seat at the table or be part of decision making one day, and you need to be prepared for that. So, you know, really just, I would encourage them to really just focus on getting themselves ready to be that expert in that room, or to be that contributor, and to speak up, even if they're not asked to speak up, but, you know, to have really take the courage to have those, you know, opportunities. So that's what I encourage you all to do.
Thank you, Tina. Linda, in 15 seconds.
Sure, and I'm going to build on sort of what folks said, and answer a question at the same time. Look for mentors in all different spaces. I think someone pointed out, you know, if you're not in an environment where there isn't a female or a person of color that you can turn to, if you see someone in leadership who is doing something well, seek them out and don't be afraid to do that. I've done that always, especially with people that I admire. And as Terrez mentioned earlier, people tend to be flattered when you ask them for help and for mentorship and to build that relationship. So don't be afraid to do that.
Lisa.
I'll just build on what Linda said and take it a step further to say, I think all of us, and thank you ladies for sharing your advice today, all of us have been beneficiaries of those mentors and sponsors. And I think we've all shared that, someone who took the time to give us coaching, advice, and to pave a path for us. So I would just say to everyone, take the time and the responsibility to bring somebody else along. We're only going to get where we need to go if we continue to pave the path for those that come behind us. So I just encourage you to continue sharing the knowledge and experiences that you have with those that will come behind us, because that is the future and the only way we're going to be able to do it together.
Oh my goodness gracious, this went so fast. We've got to have a part 2, Chiling and Pat. And so I'm going to just thank each of these ladies for spending your time. And it's just a lesson for me, no matter how long you've been around or how old you get, you can always learn something. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm going to hand it back to our leader, Pat Fong Kushida.
Well, I have to tell you, ladies, I have been so inspired today by all of you, and I don't want this to end. You had over 137 folks watching this. We had over 287 folks signed up, but 137 folks watching this, and the Q&A and the comments just keep coming. So I want to give all of you a virtual hand. Yes, that was amazing, amazing panel. And thank you so much, Terrez, for your leadership. I'm just going to tell you my takeaways. Girls, I'm 61 years old, and it's never too late to learn. Never too late. And I was writing furiously, but you know, Sue, when you said through your darkest moment is when you can make the greatest progress, that really touched something in me. And, you know, Lisa, you know, just use your gravestones as your stepping stones. I mean, amazing words, right? I mean, I've got all of these great things. I just want to keep going, right? And you know, Tina, for you to talk about, you know, don't be afraid to fail. And you deserve a seat at the table, right? That's huge. And then just the recognition that we all have imposter syndrome, right? And as women, to be able to own who you are, have the confidence to know that you are of worth, of value, that you're smart enough, that you're bright enough, that you're all of those things, that you deserve a seat at that table, that you deserve a place at that table is so impactful. And I'm just going to tell you, ladies, I could go on for another couple hours. So thank you so much, Terrez. Thank you so much, panel, for such an amazing conversation. We'll do this again for sure, right? We're going to do this again for sure. So with that, again, thank you so much. We're now going to, I think, I'm getting back to script. Before we log off, we're going to announce the winner of our Southwest Airlines round trip e-pass that can be used anywhere in the Southwest. But before we do this, I'd like to bring my good friend and colleague, Chiling Tong, back on the screen. Chiling, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for the panelists. Yes, amazing panel. Absolutely amazing. I learned a lot, and especially during this difficult times, really inspire us. As a women, we're facing the challenges from the work, from the family, everything. But I feel I always inspired by this kind of discussion, and make me, you know, make us move forward in the future.
So thank you, Chiling. You have been such a great partner through this program, and I look forward to continued working together. And so thank you so much for your leadership as well. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to introduce Karen Price Ward, who's the Community Outreach Regional Leader for Southwest. Karen, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Pat, Chiling, and all of the panelists. Fantastic job. I learned so much and so excited to take that information and put it into action. And what I'd like to share with you today is that Southwest Airlines, we want to let you know that we have a Southwest promise. And when you are ready to travel again, we will be ready for you. And so we are taking stringent steps to make sure that we are being safe. And we are doing that both through electrostatic disinfectant and antimicrobial spray that we're applying to every surface on the aircraft. We're killing viruses with this antimicrobial coating shield that will last for 30 days. We are also using a broad spectrum disinfectant that we use on board to clean our lavatories and also the tray tables. We do that between every flight. And we are doing some deep cleaning from the plane, in our plane, from the nose to the tail. And we do that every 6 to 7 hours. And we do that every night. So we just want to let you know that we understand that people want to have a sense of confidence when they travel. So please know that we are boarding 10 people at a time. We're not selling the middle seat until October 31st. We also are doing quite a few extensions on your travel funds, and you can find that information on our website. And so without further ado, I do want to share that we're giving away 1 round trip ticket, and these tickets are valid to our 101 destinations. They do not have any blackout dates, but there is an expiration date, so make sure you take a look at that. And you must be present to win. And if your name is called, please make sure that you go to the chat button and let us know that you are here with us. So today's winner is Manisha with MUFG Union Bank. Are you with us, Manisha? We'll see if we see something in the chat. Do we see her? Okay. If not, we'll go to the next person. Just double checking. Okay, so the next person that could win the round trip ticket is from State Farm. And I have Thuyu. Did I get that correct? Thuyu. And you must be present. If you are present, please make sure you let us know in the chat function.
Here.
Yay, congratulations. And you will be contacted afterwards to receive your award or your gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So we really do appreciate the partnership with Southwest. So thank you everyone for joining us. I think it was an amazing conversation, and we're going to continue this conversation on Friday, August 28th, and our panel is going to be called Bringing Women of Color to the Table. So we encourage you all to sign up, and we look forward to all of you participating in. And thank you again to my good friend Chiling at National A's and for the Minority Development Agency for hosting this event. And until we see each other again, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. See you next week.